Hey folks, it's me, Breadbeard, and welcome to my new format, which isn't a whole lot different, except I'm going to start trying to put out new weekly content that's a little quicker, because sometimes there's certain topics that I want to talk about that don't really require a long, high-produced video, and if you don't know, those videos take a long time to make. So I'm still going to be putting out those videos, just a little bit more about a monthly basis, and I'm going to start trying to pump these out about every week. So this week we're talking about reformism. So, are anarchists reformists? If you ask 10 anarchists what they think about reformism, well, you get about 10 different answers. We don't always do too well with cohesive ideology. And part of that is because anarchist thinkers have all had different and often conflicting viewpoints. Turns out they're all humans with different perspectives and ideas. And that's not such a bad thing. Blindly following ideology and hero worship leads to dogmatism instead of action. That's a topic for another video though. I don't feel like being canceled by terminally online anarchists for that one today. Instead, I'm going to cancel myself over this one. Should anarchists be reformists? Yes. But wait, there's more to the video than that. And I need you all to keep watching so the dear dastardly algorithm gods don't cancel me too. Seriously folks, staying afloat while running a channel isn't easy. Now wait, I thought reforms were just petty gestures by the state fueled by identity politics and pacifying the masses. And you're right. Confused yet? Reforms granted by the state to those working within the system are definitely aimed at pacification, and they've worked to the state's benefit immensely. But that's not what I'm talking about here. It breaks down to two kinds of reformists. First, let's talk about what kind of reforms are not beneficial to revolutionary goals. What I'm not referring to are small, moderate facades of illusory improvements. More female corporate CEOs, police kneeling for photo ops, politicians embracing purely aesthetic LGBTQ slogans, a mayor naming a plaza to Black Lives Matter Plaza, and then funding police to beat heads and destroy mutual aid food supplies on that same plaza do not a revolution make. I'm pulling heavily from articles written by Malatesta on this video, and in the essay Anarchism and Reforms, he sees these kinds of reformists as those who strive for small and often illusory improvements in order to make the regime more palatable, thereby helping to reinforce it. Or those who, in good faith, seek to eliminate social ills while recognizing and respecting, in practice if not in theory, the very political and social institutions which have given rise to and which feed those ills. I'm sure you have many friends and family who fall into this category, and honestly, they do believe this is the prudent path forward. But that's not us. We as revolutionaries do not and should not accept these tokens as victories. In fact, embracing them does nothing but obscure the public's revolutionary attention. So what is the other kind of reform, I hear you asking through your screen in some strange failure of linear time? The other is the kind of reform that strengthens our cause, radical reforms that set a stronger stage for insurrection. Not to improve institutions that already exist, but to improve our positions to destroy those institutions. The truth is, while I said there's two kinds of reform, the first one is actually a misnomer. These are hopeful and misguided improvements to an establishment set up to only allow changes that still benefit itself. That's not reform. That's improvements on the window dressing. The word reform itself tells the motives of a true radical reformist. To form again. To remove what is in place and form something radically different than what was before. Again, Malatesta says it better. We are revolutionaries and insurrectionaries because we want not just to improve the institutions that now exist, but to destroy them utterly, abolish all and every form of power by man over man and all parasitism of whatever kind on human labor. And that is what we must be, revolutionaries and insurrectionaries that seek change in order to educate and loosen the shackles of the masses so that they can join us and we can all fight stronger. A great example of this is when, through toil and literal blood, anarchist reformists brought us the 8-hour workday. This alone didn't free the working class, but it made it that much harder for the bosses to keep you on your shift and away from strengthening your communities. If I was forced to work 72-hour shifts 7 days a week, there's no way I could be making these videos or you could be watching them. Also, watching YouTube videos isn't going to topple the state. Go do direct action and mutual aid. Guess what? There's a list of those in the description too, but still watch my videos, I need you. When workers strike for better workplace conditions, they are participating in revolutionary reform. They are wresting power away from their oppressors. When tenant organizations stop landlords from creating more homeless from their own gains, then they show the neighbors that the elites cannot do whatever they want. When protesters march and block roadways, and a couple of extra things that I'd never advocate, which would violate YouTube's terms of service, they apply powerful pressure on our oppressors. They increase their position to make demands and have them met. Inevitably, there's going to be some comments calling back to my videos against voting for Biden. First off, I don't care if you voted. I do care if you only voted, and I care if you shame those who don't vote. But really, my point of those videos is I don't see someone like Biden as setting a better stage when he offers nothing of true reform. The offerings and cabinet set forth so far are textbook window dressing. And revolutionary reform won't be found in a voting booth. It's in the streets and in our communities. The difference is, are you asking or are you forcing? The ruling class will always be guided by self-preservation. When they consent to reform, it's only if they stand to gain or otherwise stand to lose. Does it serve their ends? If you're asking them by voting in the nicer sounding politician or cheering on a corporation changing their logo to a rainbow flag, you're just chasing after what they've decided is a gain for them, not you. But if we are forcing them to cede ground because continuously resisting us would lead to a worse alternative, we've pushed closer to revolution. A war of attrition isn't our only tactic, but it is a tactic we must utilize. Wars aren't won in a single day, and we should be thinking about our tactics in terms of war, taking our gains where we can and using them as tools to weaken our enemy even further. Malatesta speaks of the revolutionary reformist as, they demand and impose improvements by their actions and welcome them as partial victories over the class enemy, using them as a spur to greater achievements, and thus they are a valid help and a preparation to the total overthrow of privilege that is for the revolution. Really, I don't often use the term the revolution, as in the big showdown that will happen someday, because revolution is an ongoing struggle. We are in the revolution right now, but it is a war that we will lose if you simply remain passive as a spectator, waiting for the right moment to come about. That moment only comes through hard-earned victories, through revolutionary reform. But this only works if the pressure is continuously applied, making the establishment realize there is no going back to the position they were in before. And when they finally make concessions, meaningful material concessions, then we still don't let up. Instead, we must apply even more pressure, pressing on. This is an ongoing struggle, and we cannot accept superficial gestures as a job well done, losing sight of the next goal and the next and the next and the next. This doesn't mean things can't also happen quickly. You probably know the Lenin quote, there are decades when nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. I think Lenin was a little bit off on that, to be honest. Those decades are filled with struggle and gains. This is what leads to those weeks of rapid change. When a dam bursts, it's because of long, forceful, and constant pressure eroding the strength of anything that holds the flood back. And let's not forget about what happens after the dam is burst. What about after the revolution? Socialist philosophers from Marx to Bakunin to Rocker to Kropotkin have all talked about the struggles that will face a newly freed society, should they just think an equitable society will magically pop up. In short, we will have to work through reform, as other post-revolutionary nations have had to. We'll face obstacles like power vacuums, still remaining reactionaries, and pressure from reactionary nations worldwide. But we face them through reforming our victories, restructuring, and constant advancement. But I guess that's getting a little ahead of ourselves. The important thing here is that we recognize our enemy and we fight them. We recognize our allies now and yet to be, and we aid them. We educate them and we lift them up, weakening the burdens of their chains by showing them that we help us. And the reforms they need will never be handed over graciously by the state. I'll leave you with one last quote from Malatesta. "We shall never recognize the existing institutions. We shall carry out all possible reforms in the spirit in which an army advances ever forwards by snatching the enemy-occupied territory in its path, and we shall always remain hostile to any government." Hey folks, thanks for sticking through to the end. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you enjoyed the new format. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions or any topics you'd like to see me discuss in the future, just put them down in the comments and I'll see if I can get around to them. And I really want to thank all of my supporters, both on Patreon and on Ko-fi. This channel would not be possible at all without you. I now have a Ko-fi Gold account, which also has the exact same benefits as having a Patreon account, but Ko-fi doesn't steal 13% from me, so consider that. Thanks, folks. Stay safe and stay active. Bye.
Capitalism builds, to make profit. And there's no profit in poor people unless you exploit them. We don't have the resources and we don't have the capital, you see, but we don't have the technology, but we have the intent. In fact, I am firmly convinced that housing will never meet the people's needs until the people build housing for themselves.